Hey there, I'm glad you're back. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. This story is about the cursed werewolf Drako Silversmouth. The first part shall be linked below in the description. If you like werewolf stories, you're in the right place. We are diving deep into their territory. Please be comfortable. Here I begin. Date: London 1680. People are returning to their normal lives again after the Great Plague. You ever wake up with the world pressing against your ribs like it's trying to remember where you ended and where something else began, something not quite man, not quite memory, just hunger wrapped in skin, and all you've got to tell you who you were is the meat in your teeth, like a clue from a crime you can't remember committing? It's there again, fibrous, clotted, tasting of copper and filth and fear. A stringy bit caught right in the gum behind my broken canine, the one that snapped off after it got hit by a bullet years ago and never healed right, jagged as a warning, dull as old sin, and my tongue, dry and swollen, moves slow and desperate, worrying at the gap like it's trying to solve a riddle with too many answers and no right one. Just blood and silence and more blood. Always the first sign, that dull ache blooming in the hinge of the jaw, the soreness that travels down the neck and into the shoulders like a bruise you don't remember earning, the feeling that something lived inside you all night and stretched itself full against your bones, and now it's gone but not gone, like it left its echo in the hollows of your chest. Pain is the first feeling, constant pain, constant rage. I sit up slow, the way an old tree might creak its way into spring, every joint stiff from stillness, from cold, from whatever I did under the moon's pale eye, and the cave around me shifts in silence, breathes in tandem like it remembers me, like it holds me in contempt or compassion, I can never quite tell which, but it holds me just the same. This hole, this den, this wound I made in the side of Epping Forest, carved into the hillside with claw and fury and patience when there was nothing else left to do, it's still here, still mine, still damp with old blood and secrets too thick to wash away, and it smells like ash and moss and something rotting slow, something that won't stop dying, not really, not ever. In the corner, I've kept things, scraps, relics, proof of lives I touched or tore, things that clung to me in the aftermath. A pile of buttons, a bowl made from horn, a coat that wasn't mine but fits like a memory, and among them, half buried in shadow, a small button shaped like a bird, delicate, harmless, the kind a child might wear stitched to a frock by loving hands, and I can't look at it, not today, not now. So I push it deeper into the dark where my guilt sleeps. The light outside is weak, reluctant, like it too is afraid of what it might see today, me, hunched and half-changed, body still trembling from the unmaking, skin still stretched too tight, hair in places no man should have hair, but I'm walking, upright, breathing, and breathing's the curse, isn't it? It means I've got to keep doing this, keep waking, keep remembering just enough to hurt. Some mornings I cry and don't know why until the bile rises in my throat and I taste something that used to be someone, and other times, like today, the rage comes first, pulsing in my fists, triggered by voices that don't belong here, echoes from years past, boots trampling the earth above a trench where I lay dying, forgotten, a boy-shaped secret left to rot in a pit of the Great Plague. I remember the way they laughed, the soldiers or guards or whoever they were, faceless now, just shadows with names I never knew, stepping over me like I was already gone, and maybe I was, bones sticking out of skin, plague chewing holes in my lungs, every blister a burning mouth on my chest, and my mother, God, my mother, she stopped saying my name as if not speaking it would let her forget it, and the last thing she gave me was a crust of bread she left by the door like a peace offering. To the devil. She should have poisoned it. The dreams don't stop, not really, not dreams at all but memories twisted by time and moonlight, the pit, the lime stinging my back, the smell of rot thick as stew, and worse, the breathing, the whimpering, the soft scratching of those who weren't quite dead yet, wrapped in canvas and desperation, praying or begging or cursing, I couldn't tell, and then it came. The sound first, bones grinding against stone, weight shifting in the dark, and then the shape, impossibly tall, for that shimmered like moonlight drowned in blood, and those eyes, ancient, empty, full, and it didn't kill me, didn't feed, didn't tear. It touched me, gently, a claw against my chest, and I felt my heart seize and change and open and close, and when I woke, days later, I wasn't dying anymore. But I wasn't living either. There's a fox near the entrance of the cave, its body limp, neck snapped, eyes glassy, and it's fresh, not even stiff, which means I did this just before dawn, without thought, without memory, just instinct, and I stare at it with that familiar blend of revulsion and hunger and grief, because I don't want it but I need it, and the ache in my jaw says I already began, so I finish, quick and quiet, chewing until the taste turns to ash. Funny, isn't it, how names stick even after you don't? They gave me one like it would cage me, Drako Silversmouth, spoken like a curse, a condemnation, as if a name could explain the darkness under your skin. But I remember names that meant something, names spoken in love or duty, like the one my father gave me. Richard James Drake, cartographer, dreamer, man of stars and ink, who once told me, "A name's a map, boy, and if you follow it right, you'll always find your way home." But what if there is no home left? Now I'm the map others follow, in stories, in shadows, in the crackling hush between firelight and sleep. They speak of me in whispers, in warnings, in riddles children dare not repeat in daylight. The beast of Epping, the silver-jawed demon, the thing that howls and leaves no bones, and when they say my name, they say it like thunder, like prophecy. But here, in the cave, I say it softly, like a wound. I sit and I try not to think, because thinking leads to remembering, and remembering leads to seeing, and seeing means facing the faces, the ones that flash before me just before the memory slips away. A young man with kind eyes, a girl with laughter in her voice, a thief, maybe, a poet, maybe, or just folk who took the wrong path at the wrong hour, all bones now. I am still breathing. And that feels wrong because when the rage arrives, there shall be more deaths, a hunger I cannot quite control easily. A crow cries out, once, then twice, then again, 3 short bursts, measured, intentional, and I freeze, every muscle pulling taut, every hair rising, because crows don't speak in patterns unless someone taught them, and someone only teaches them when they're watching close. Someone is near. There's a strange hush that falls over Epping when death enters the treeline, not the common kind, not the quiet ending of a rabbit under tooth or the desperate struggle of one wild thing against another, but a deeper silence, one shaped like reverence or fear, the kind of quiet that settles when something older has entered the woods, something with the scent of gunpowder in its coat and orders stitched into the creases of its boots. The forest knows the difference. It always has. Birds do not call warning. They vanish. The wind, so often restless, stops to listen. And even the things that burrow, foxes, badgers, rodents of claw and twitch, press themselves deeper into the earth as if hoping to sink beyond reach, beyond memory. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the weight of anticipation, the moment before something ancient exhales. And floating through the piney dusk, curling like a crooked finger through the undergrowth, smoke. Not the kind that warms. Not hearth smoke. This carries brimstone and wet ash. Birchwood, sulfur, something ritualistic in its reek. The kind of fire built by men who come to destroy. Let me take you back to some years, era of the inventions that bother. They say London is a city of light, a place where invention grows from soot and desperation, and yet as I walk its alleys, watching the smoke rise from the ironworks and listening to the gunsmiths boast of their latest mechanisms, lock flints that fire faster than thought, barrels groove to send death further and truer, I find no joy in these marvels of metal and flame. It is the year 1680, and man now kills not with honor, but with distance, with noise, with a spark and a twitch. Where once a sword demanded courage, and a musket required at least proximity, Now the city celebrates tools that sever life from half a street away. The common folk, ragpickers, chimney sweeps, washerwomen and beggar boys, shuffle through the fog with eyes cast downward, their lives no richer for the brilliance of this so-called progress. The smiths hammer through the night, each bang a drumbeat toward a colder world. I, Drako Silversmouth, who have known the ferocity of Fong and the burden of blood, cannot celebrate this. There is less soul in steel than in sweat, and far less mercy in gunpowder than in the teeth of the wild. By the time I returned to the cave, the cold had settled into the stones like a sickness. My bones hadn't yet let go of the night. My body still carried the echo of something monstrous. I could feel it in my spine, in the joints of my fingers, in the crack behind my eye where a vein throbbed like it remembered how to burst. I wore the scraps of someone else's life, shirt too tight across the shoulders, a belt cinched 3 notches past comfort, boots soaked with mud. The taste lingered. Not blood, not precisely, though it clung to my teeth like a sin, but something behind it, deeper. The flavor of terror. Of a name lost in the moment their throat collapsed under my hand. It haunts the mouth differently, leaves you tasting your own memory like bile. The loam crackled underfoot. Wet leaves whispered of movement. I passed a carcass just past the alder line. A horse, sunken and skeletal, ribs jutting like snapped fingers toward the sky. Wild dogs ringed it, lean things with pink tongues and wary eyes. They paused as I approached, hackles twitching. I looked at them. They looked back. And then, with no sound, they vanished into the underbrush. Predators can smell hierarchy. The trees closed tighter the deeper I went. They always do, this far in. Like ribs, yes. But more than that, like a mouth, like the woods are preparing to swallow you whole. Light fails first, then sound. The smoke wasn't drifting. It was leading, threading between trunks like a trail set by ghosts. And where the birch gave way to pine and the canopy thinned, I saw the marks, boot prints. 5 sets, deep, precise, men who moved for bounties, or else nobody ventures into these damned woods at night. No splintered branches, no wandering. This wasn't a drunken mob. This was a squad. A unit, disciplined, military, or worse. And one set of prints, larger, heavier, the toe angled just slightly outward with a familiar drag in the heel. I knew it. I had known it since childhood. My father, Richard James Drake. Mapmaker, monster hunter, philosopher of the void. A man who once said, "We do not kill the dark boy, we teach it to remember who holds the light." I once held his hand in church. Now, he holds a crucifix for protection. I don't know if he suspects the truth. I don't know if he knows the thing they're tracking is me. Or if he knew long before I did. They moved through the clearing, setting traps. Sigils carved into trees, small mirrors buried in moss, salt circles, bone warts. Rituals, ancient precautions. The kind he once used to protect a child's room from nightmares. Now he used them to bind me. I could have leapt down. Ended it. The monster in me flexed its claws at the thought. Violence thrummed beneath my skin like a hymn. But something stopped me. Something older than rage. Something almost human. A need to be seen. Not as a beast. Not as the thing they hunted. But as a son. Finch peeled away from the group, eyes flicking toward the tree line. He sniffed the air. "Something's watching," he muttered. I eased back. Slowly. No sound. Still, I could have ended him. But I didn't. They moved through the clearing, setting traps. Sigils carved into trees, small mirrors buried in moss, salt circles, bone warts. Rituals, ancient precautions. The kind he once used to protect a child's room from nightmares. Now he used them to bind me. I could have leapt down, ended it. The monster in me flexed its claws at the thought. Violence thrummed beneath my skin like a hymn. But something stopped me. Something older than rage. something almost human. Finch peeled away from the group, eyes flicking toward the tree line. He sniffed the air. "Something's watching," he muttered. I eased back, slowly, no sound. Still, I could have ended him. But I didn't. Welsby Hollow had always been the kind of place that maps forgot but nightmares remembered, tucked into the crooked edge of Epping Forest like a thorn in the mouth of something much older than England. And it wasn't just the fog or the crumbling cottages that curled in on themselves like dying things, nor the twisted iron fences overgrown with ivy like veins wrapped too tight around bone. It was the pulse beneath the soil, the whisper of old gods buried in peat, the sense that the air itself remembered every scream it had ever swallowed. It wasn't difficult to follow them, not for someone like me. The hunters, hardened though they were, disciplined though they claimed to be, left careless trails once they reached the edge of Epping, boot prints mashed into the mud like open wounds, snapped branches that crackled beneath their weight, the faint scent of pipe ash and tanned leather lingering like ghosts behind them. Towns dull a man's instinct. Roads give fools the illusion of safety. I walked far enough behind to not be seen, close enough to catch every word they failed to swallow. Hood drawn low, jerkin pulled tight. The dried blood around my cuffs flaked off in brittle curls with every step, old blood, but not mine. I kept to the edges of paths, between hedgerows and behind broken stone walls, a phantom riding the breath of dusk until I reached it, Welsby Hollow. A village so shrouded in obscurity it might have been birthed from rumor alone. A name whispered by traders too drunk to remember where they heard it, a place that survived not by grace or law, but by what didn't come back from the trees. And in the marrow of its crooked bones, as if the village itself were built around the stink of it, stood the crow's flask. It was not a tavern. It was a wound. A gash in the earth where men went to forget the faces of those they buried and the sins they drank to wash away. The planks that formed its walls leaned together like dying men propped up in a trench. The roof sagged so low it seemed to weep, its edges scalloped with moss that dripped like bile in the rain. The chimney belched smoke like a dying cough. But within, it pulsed, alive with clattering tankards, off-key fiddles, laughter too sharp to be friendly, and the sighs of old floorboards under too many boots. I stepped inside. The heat struck like a hand to the face, thick, wet with sweat, grease, and the stink of ale left too long in unwashed mugs. It crawled into my nostrils, clung to my beard, tried to bury the sharp, cold scent of the forest still coiled around my skin. Faces turned toward me, briefly. Suspicious. Curious. But this was Welsby Hollow, and strangers didn't raise eyebrows here. Strangers disappeared. I found a place in the corner, under a chandelier made of antlers and wax so thick it hung like stalactites. The shadows there were deep enough to hide the twitch behind my left eye, the one that flared when the hunger gnawed. I sat with my back to the wall and I watched. In my semi-human form, I tried to mingle amongst the selfish human race. They were there. All 5 of them. The hunters, just as I had counted in the woods. Gathered at a round table near the hearth, weapons stacked lazily nearby as though they believed the danger had passed. One raised a mug. Another tore into meat with grease-slick fingers. And at the center of them, presiding like a gravestone over a forgotten churchyard, sat Richard James Drake, my father. Time had chewed on him but hadn't swallowed him whole. His jaw was still iron, still mapped with scars that I had once traced with a child's awe. A thread of gray now ran through the beard he used to blacken with soot. He wore a long coat trimmed in wolf fur, irony so bitter it almost made me laugh, and twin pistols rested at his belt, their irons smooth with wear, well-loved. The others called him Captain. They leaned into his words like moths to flame. But he didn't speak often. And when he did, they listened like the dead might listen for resurrection. He watched the fire. I watched him. The beast in me stirred, that low, constant growl behind my ribs sharpening into something more pointed. Rage, grief, maybe both, maybe neither. I dug my fingers into the grain of the table beneath me, hard enough to splinter it. I wanted to leap, I wanted to tear. But I didn't. Then came her voice. "You want something warm, love?" She moved like smoke, like the kind that chokes before it comforts. Tall, maybe taller than me in her worn heels. Hair the color of wine left too long in the rain, tied with a ribbon that might have once been green. Bodice pulled tight across a frame forged for survival, not seduction. Her eyes didn't flirt. They measured. "Drink?" she asked again. "Small beer," I muttered. "Food?" "No." She lifted an eyebrow. "Not hungry." I smiled, just enough to make her uneasy. "Not for food." She left without another word. Smart girl. The fiddler struck up something in the corner, a song made more of teeth than tune, one of those wandering ballads sung by men who never came back from war. Women drifted near the hearth, their laughter like snapped twigs, too brittle to be real. One of the hunters, young, cocky, doomed, pulled a girl into his lap and slapped her thigh like she was venison. She smiled like a corpse might. She moved like smoke, like the kind that chokes before it comforts. Tall, maybe taller than me in her worn heels. Hair the color of wine left too long in the rain, tied with a ribbon that might have once been green. Bodice pulled tight across a frame forged for survival, not seduction. Her eyes didn't flirt. They measured. "Drink?" she asked again. "Small beer," I muttered. "Food?" "No." She lifted an eyebrow. "Not hungry." I smiled, just enough to make her uneasy. "Not for food." She left without another word. Smart girl. The fiddler struck up something in the corner, a song made more of teeth than tune, one of those wandering ballads sung by men who never came back from war. Women drifted near the hearth, their laughter like snapped twigs, too brittle to be real. One of the hunters, young, cocky, doomed, pulled a girl into his lap and slapped her thigh like she was venison. She smiled like a corpse might. And for me, the silver-furred, sharp-toothed echo of something they had buried but not destroyed, they had drawn a bounty in bone and gold. 100 sovereigns for my pelt, the color of ash in snow, the texture of silk ruined by fire, and the stipulation that the kill must be marked by a broken canine and confirmed by flame, because they feared not my claws or fangs but what I proved. Their leader was a man who had long since forgotten the meaning of names, speaking only in orders barked like gunfire through clenched teeth stained with tobacco and memory, Richard James Drake, who once upon a time held me in his arms as a father holds a son, but now tracked me like a dog with mange, believing me lost to the trench fires of plague-ridden London, unaware that the boy he buried had crawled out of that pit with fire in his lungs and teeth sharpened by grief. He did not know what I had become, and I did not know if that made it easier. Their party moved from the tavern to the outskirts of the village, toward the skeleton of a mill collapsed in on itself like a snapped spine, where they formed a crescent of tents and tinder, laying traps with silent precision, each hunter falling into rhythm like soldiers born into the march. Rook, the one with black powder fingers and a habit of lighting matches just to hear them burn, strung silver-threaded snares between alder roots, muttering the names of saints through teeth too straight for this work. Finch, young, fast, mouth full of teeth, eyes full of calculation, the kind who killed for pleasure but studied death like scripture, packed satchels of dynamite wrapped in parchment inked with half-remembered prayers. Ox, a tower of flesh, thick and slow-looking, but never slow, adjusted his silver-stitched gloves with the elegance of a man who didn't need elegance. His wolfsbane satchel reeked of oil and menace. Lorimer, blind but not blind, with bandages where eyes once were and other senses dialed so finely he once tracked a beast by the scent of its grief, scanned the forest with his head tilted toward the tremble of air. And Richard Drake, my father, stood at the back of the formation, silent, heavy, watching not with his eyes, but with something deeper, more instinctual. The scent of him was familiar and foreign all at once. They spoke little. Rook broke the silence first. God's teeth, this place stinks. Marsh gas, Finch replied, not looking up. Or your skin, Ox muttered, voice like a wet stone grinding. It's not just the air, Lorimer added, face to the wind. Something moved here recently. Something that doesn't move like prey. Crouched on my branch, I smiled. Not out of joy, but memory. They were good. And at the center, my father, carved invisible sigils into the dirt with the heel of his boot, not words, not spells, but memory turned to muscle, rituals etched into the marrow of him after too many years chasing the unknown. I crouched above them in the underbrush, still as wrought, my breath held like a blade between my teeth, listening as they spoke around their fire, their voices low, careful, brittle with the weight of what they feared to name. If we take it alive, we double the price, Cecily said, her voice like frost on a blade. You want it alive? Torrin chuckled. Then bring a coffin made of silver. Saint Imeric's word is law, Lambert said flatly. Burn the body. Keep the teeth. Then Bennett spoke, quieter than before. It's not just the pelt. He's tied to something bigger. The thing that bit him, they say it's still out there. Stronger. Older. You mean the silver one? Cecily asked. No, Bennett whispered. That was him. I mean the first Maw. I had not heard that name in years, but the name did stir a memory. When I leaned too close, the pain beneath my ribs sang like a buried blade awakened by memory. I moved before they could, circling wide, dragging my scent through shallow ravines and broken roots, leaving a trail only a wolf would follow, letting them believe they had me cornered. They moved in formation, those hunters, each wrapped in wool and iron, and though they said little, their silence was thick with purpose, and I watched them from above, tucked in the crook of an ancient ash tree 30 feet high, my limbs still as bark, my breath measured. Bennett, still young enough to speak without thinking, broke that silence first, wrinkling his nose and muttering, God's teeth, this place stinks. Like something dyed up a bishop's arse. Marsh gas, Torrin replied without looking at him. Or maybe your breath. Or your brain, Cecily added sharply, torchlight licking across her pale cheekbones, her eyes like twin razors sweeping through the underbrush for the slightest tremor, the smallest shift, because she wasn't just walking, she was hunting by scent, by spell, by the thrum of wrongness she was trained to feel, and her gloves, stitched with silver thread and soot, flexed as she knelt by a moss-covered log, brushing away damp leaves to expose 3 shallow claw marks. She studied them, head tilting like a fox catching wind. Fresh, she muttered. We're close. Behind her, my father crouched. Said nothing, just pressed a thick finger to the claw marks, then rose, eyes scanning the canopy with the patience of a man who'd seen too many things vanish into trees. For a heartbeat, his gaze passed right over me, and something inside me pulled taut, like a string too close to snapping. But he moved on. What's the bounty again? Bennett asked after a stretch of silence, his voice lower now, as though the trees might listen. 100 sovereigns, Torrin answered. Double if the skull's clean. Enough to build a house, muttered Lambert, his branded eye always scanning. Enough to burn one, Cecily corrected. Gold's good for blood these days. The torchlight flickered, cast their shadows long and mean, and I dropped silently from my perch, landing behind them without a sound, my form half shadow, half memory, the kind of shape that lives between sleep and scream, and I moved between the trees like breath, like fog curling beneath doors. They didn't hear. Not until Richard Drake's hand went to the hilt of his blade. They moved on, finally settling near the edge of the Black Ditch ruins, stones and ivy twisted like broken ribs clawing from the earth, the remnants of a chapel that had once dared to house something divine, now only sheltering moss, damp, and secrets. And there, by the boundary where the holy had failed, they made their camp, laying their weapons in ritualistic lines, placing dynamite with reverence like relics, and drawing chalk sigils into the soil with whispers that tried to mimic faith but only managed fear. Rain came as a mist, soft as breath, then thickened to drizzle, washing scent trails and hiding my movements as I circled them again, always just beyond torchlight, my body aching with hunger, with memory, with the quiet fury of a hunted thing who once called one of these men father. Richard's voice cut the quiet. We wait till dawn. Tracks cleaner then. And if he finds us first? Cecily asked, voice sharp as her blades. Lambert shrugged. Then we die clean. I don't want clean, Bennett muttered, tossing a dagger into a tree stump where it trembled like a heartbeat. I want him screaming. Was it me that they were hunting, or was it the first? The first maw? The bounty was large, but too large. Lavish even for the sanctum. And the way Bennett had whispered that name, the first maw, it crawled up my spine like a memory I'd buried beneath decades of blood and frost. The night was dense and full of watching things, the kind of night that crept in through your ears and filled your lungs with dread, and though the fire had long since gone to embers, still the wind carried with it the scent of ash, moss. Only one man among the hunters remained awake, Richard Drake, the elder, the father, the drinker, the one who once held the hand of a plague-stricken boy and now cradled a flask of whiskey like it was a relic from a better life, his eyes locked on the tree-line. Not blinking, not breathing fully, because something inside him knew that the woods were holding their breath too. The others slept like fools or the damned, curled in bedrolls, weapons resting just out of reach, believing the chalk lines Cecily had drawn would be enough, believing the fire would ward off more than insects and doubt. But he had seen more than they had buried more, and as he drank, he counted the seconds between the owl calls and wondered why the trees no longer moved with the wind. Miles away, though to one like me, distance was little more than a trick of the mind, I watched them through eyes that weren't entirely mine anymore, from the top of a broken ridge lined with thorn and ruin, crouched in shadow, breath low, heart steady, senses stretched across the forest floor like a web spun from old blood and fear, and I could feel the storm coming, not in the sky, but in the ground, in the rot, in the teeth. And I wasn't alone. Somewhere deeper, darker, older still, something stirred. The pack, yes, but not just any. The pack, with the Alpha at their lead, Volgar, the name whispered like a curse by those who dared believe in hierarchy among monsters, his scent arriving on the wind before his shape did, thick with iron and smoke and ancient, endless rage, his silver-streaked fur glistening like steel left out too long in rain, his scar, a jagged thing splitting his muzzle like a cruel smile carved by fate itself, already bared before he had even emerged from the tree-line, and I felt him, felt the gravity of him, like a mountain-turned predator, like a god who'd been wronged one too many times. They moved in silence. Not one snap of twig, not one hiss of breath, and still, I knew where they were, surrounding the camp like fog, each one of them carrying that same cold fury in their bones, that same hunger to tear down the myth of man with tooth and claw and fury that had waited too long in the dark. It began when the first branch cracked, not loudly, not carelessly, but precisely, as if to say, we are here, and Richard stood, rifle in hand, silver round already chambered, the old sigil gleaming in the moonlight like prophecy fulfilled too late. And then the woods exploded. From the left, a pair of beasts lunged through the canopy, all limbs and howl, jaws open wide enough to snap bone, their eyes burning with red hunger, and the first to land met Richard's bullet head-on, the silver round punching through fur and skull and memory, dropping it to the earth in a twitching, bleeding heap. But the second was already there, tearing through Lambert's shoulder with one swipe, dragging him from sleep into agony. Cecily screamed, knife in one hand, torch in the other, carving the air as she shouted sigils like prayers, and the fire flared, but not before another wolf slammed into Torin's back, sending him sprawling into the stones, his breath ripped from his chest by the sheer force of it. They were everywhere. The ruins became a killing field, the night pulsing with the sound of claws scraping stone, screams cut short, bones snapping like old twigs. And still Richard stood, firing again and again, each shot dropping one of the monsters but not slowing them. Not enough, not nearly. From my perch I watched. I could see the way Volgar moved, calm, like he was measuring them, calculating how long it would take before they broke, before fear made them careless, before he could take the head of the man who once fathered the thing I had become. And when he finally stepped into the clearing, his bulk pushing aside stone and ash like it was nothing. Across the ridge, over the stone, through the fire, leaping with everything I had left, every ounce of blood and curse and will, and I slammed into Volgar just as his claws reached for my father's throat, sending us both crashing into the shattered altar stones, dust and bone exploding around us as we tore into each other. No words, no posturing, just fury and fire and survival. He was strong, stronger than anything I had ever fought, and every blow he gave was like a hammer made of hate, and every blow I returned was carved from guilt and vengeance, and we rolled and bled and bit and snarled, tearing at each other while the pack circled and the hunters regrouped, some fleeing, some firing, but all knowing this was no longer their fight. This was ours. Volgar tore into my shoulder. I clawed into his gut. He tried to break my leg. I tried to rip out his throat. The world a blur of red and pain and sound so loud it became silence. And still we fought, ancient stones cracking beneath us, the ruins groaning like they remembered what war felt like. Then he got the upper hand. His knee slammed into my spine and his fist into my jaw, and I was down, pinned, his breath in my face, his teeth at my throat. The charge hit me like a landslide of teeth and fury, Volgar's massive body a blur of shadow and silver, and in the single breath between his paws leaving the ground and our bodies colliding again, I thought I might finally break, my ribs already cracked, my blood soaking the forest floor beneath me, and still, somehow, I stood against him, throwing up both arms and letting the momentum carry us into the ancient stones once more, where the past whispered in my ears like old ghosts mourning what was about to happen. We tumbled again, clawing, biting, his breath hot and fetid, mine raw with pain and rage, until the ground swallowed us in a pit left from some long-collapsed crypt, and I used the fall to twist my body, shoving my elbow deep into his throat and drawing a roar that echoed through the ruins like a storm, a sound that sent the younger wolves flinching even as their circle remained unbroken. Above us, the hunters stumbled back, bloodied and wide-eyed, Cecily screaming at Richard, "We need to go. We need to go now." But he stayed rooted to the spot, silver rifle slack in his hands, face frozen with something between grief and awe as he watched me, his son, his monster, his memory made flesh and fur and fury. Volgar's claws slashed down my chest, leaving ribbons of fire in their wake, and I screamed, not from pain but from something deeper, something that had been growing inside me since the plague years, since the first time I'd felt the change seize my bones and rewrite my soul. Screamed like a boy who wanted to be loved and a beast who wanted to be feared, screamed like the past was burning away from my throat. "You don't get to take them." I roared into his face, pinning him against the wall of the pit, my claws wrapped around his neck now, squeezing, blood in my teeth. "Not tonight." But he grinned, even as I crushed his windpipe. And then he headbutted me. Skull against skull. White fire exploded across my vision and I stumbled back, dazed, just in time for him to rise with a growl like the death rattle of a god, his massive hands seizing my shoulders and lifting me clean off the ground before slamming me into the stone floor, once, twice, thrice, until I couldn't tell if the stars I saw were above me or inside my skull. I gasped for breath, bones creaking, my limbs trembling, my silver fur soaked red. Around us, the pack closed in. No words, only the low, shared growl of hunger and bloodlust. I tried to rise again, but Volgar was on me, one foot stomping on my chest, claws digging into my ribs, and he threw back his head and howled, a sound that shattered the air, a sound that made even the fire in the hunter's camp stutter, a sound that told the night who it belonged to. The pack echoed him, and yet they did not move. They did not strike the final blow. I met Volgar's eyes, bleeding and broken beneath his heel, and I laughed. I howled, spitting blood into his face. He snarled, but his foot lifted. He stepped back. The pack parted. The hunters were already gone, retreating into the trees, dragging the wounded, whispering legends that would grow wilder with every retelling. And I was left in the dirt, alone, breathing shallow, beaten up, bleeding. I don't know why I saved the hunters going against my own kind, but that was sudden. A desire driven by something human left inside me. Above me, the moon hung full and bright, its light silver as my fur, and I remembered the stories I told myself as a boy, of healing, of salvation, of a cure that would come in a dream or a flame or a letter from someone who knew what I really was. I remembered how the plague had twisted me into something neither man nor beast, how I'd wept the first time I felt the shift and smelled the blood and saw my reflection in a pool. I remembered my mother's lullabies. I remembered my father's disappointment. And I remembered the moment I chose to become something else. Not a monster, not a man, but something in between. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Volgar disappearing into the trees. And then silence. Only the wind. Only the moon. Only Drako Silversmouth, waiting for the next hunt, waiting for the next war, waiting for my destiny because it is just the beginning. If you like the story, do subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot. Thank you very much.